be free from this dreaded disease. So the aim of this webinar is to have an understanding on the practices of journalism, various aspects of media that is happening during this pandemic period. So, you know, we are all facing so many difficulties, including job losses in media's industry, and revenue loss is huge. People are not, reporters are not able to go out and find what is truth, what is happening around. And, you know, the practice itself is being challenged by the peculiar ambience or atmosphere that has been created by this disease. We also know that journalists and media persons are being attacked in in India and elsewhere in the world, and so many other social implications are there to discuss. So before, this is the context that we are having this webinar series, of which the first one is titled Challenges in News Reporting during COVID-19. The seminar is conducted by Press Institute of India, an eminent NGO, non-governmental organization, who are actively researching the print media journalism practices in India. It's a very old institution. Many media scholars are very well aware of Vidura and other publications of Press Institute of India. We have personalities from Press Institute of India and, of course, UNICEF Indian chapter. So let me get into the assignment that that I am going to do today. It is welcoming the eminent panelists. First of all, let me welcome Mrs. Sudha Uma Shankar, who is a senior journalist and storyteller, to this webinar. She will be speaking about the theme in detailed manner. And now let me invite Mr. D. Krishnan, who is ex-chief editor photography of the Hindu group of publications. Both of these two eminent speakers will be giving lectures on the talks on this theme, challenges in news reporting during COVID-19. We have with us the communication specialist of UNICEF.
Why are they calling now?
Sugata Roy, who will be giving an objective view of this webinar. Mr. Shashi Nair, who is the director of Press Institute of India, and he's the editor of Vidura and Grassroots, will be joining us as the moderator of this webinar. And also we have the UNICEF consultant, Mr. Baby Arun. And let me invite all the students and all the participants who are in this Zoom meet to listen to this topic under discussion. Let me hand over to Sugata for explaining the objective of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sanjeev. It's indeed a great pleasure to always tie up with your esteemed institution. And at the outset, let me also thank Mr. Shashi Nair, Director of Press Institute of India and Editor Vidura and Grassroots, and also our eminent speakers, Mr. D. Krishnan and Madam Sudha Umashankar, for agreeing to be part of this webinar. In fact, this kind of a program we have been planning for quite some time, and we were looking for a right time to start, and now I think is the exact time when we should be initiating this kind of discussion, when most of the colleges have and schools have opened up and they are conducting classes virtually. And as you mentioned, that I have the role of to play as to tell everybody about the objective of the webinar. Let me just put it straight away that UNICEF has been working with adolescent and young people for empowering them with information and engagement. And we feel that during an emergency, young people can play a constructive role. And we have seen that during the devastating floods in Kerala during 2018, where young people played a major role in helping the communities and as well as the media. And we feel the current pandemic of COVID-19 has opened up a great opportunity for empowering these young people. Through this webinar, we want to enhance and strengthen the knowledge base of our students' fraternity and especially the students of journalism. Why? We feel that the right information and sharing this information uh, is very important to tide over any form of emergency, because fake information and fake news can create panic, it can mislead people, and it can lead to serious stigma and discrimination, which we have seen being caused uh, during the time of pandemic, where severe stigma and discrimination is going on in the society. So we feel it is very important for the journalists and young people to have the right information. But during all emergencies, journalists and reporters face immense challenge on reporting from ground zero. And in this webinar, we'll be discussing about these issues and how our reporting soldiers are able to tide over all these challenges and ensure that the right information are available with us. This is what we are going to discuss in today's webinar. And I will also request all the participants, if you have any questions, do type it out in the chat box, which Mr. Sashi Nair and we will take it up after the deliberation by our esteemed speakers. Thank you, and over.
I think
Professor Sanjeev, you are muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry. I invite Sashi Nair to take over from here so that we can move ahead with the discussion.
Thank you, Professor Sanjeev, and good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here, and it would have been a greater pleasure if we were able to have been there in your college in the midst of students. But unfortunately, that hasn't been possible. It's always a pleasure to interact with them physically and to see you all in the campus. But given the circumstances, I think this is the closest to reality that we can get. So thank you, Shugoto, and of course, I must thank Sudha and Mr. Krishnan for readily agreeing to come and share their views. The challenge for journalists has always been there. If you have to be a good journalist, a good reporter, a good sub-editor, or a news editor, you have to be able to do hard work. You have to be able to think on your feet. You have to be ready for legwork. You have to have sufficient knowledge. And you have to have that extra, fire in the belly, as they call it, the passion that shows in your work. So all that is a given if you want to be a good journalist in normal times. But in today's world, which is so very uncertain, and it's quite unprecedented, the challenge or the challenges are so many. But basically, the main challenges are about reporting accurately and also being able to report safely. Safety is an aspect that not many people consider. But now that has become paramount. When journalists are out there at the front line, journalists, photographers, taking pictures as things are happening. Before we get into this conversation with Sudha and Mr. Krishnan, I'd just like to introduce them to you. Sudha, of course, is a senior freelance journalist who's written for several newspapers here in the South and elsewhere, starting with the Times of India, the Hindu, the New Indian Express, the Indian Express, the Asian Age, Deccan Herald, the Deccan Chronicle, etc. She also writes for our publications, something she started doing recently. She's done profile, she's done features, I think her articles have focused on health and gender stories. And of course, she also writes middles for newspapers, middles in the op-ed pages. She's also authored a book on APJ Abdul Kalam. And in recent years, she's also turned a storyteller. She says she enjoys doing that. And most of her stories are about creating awareness on social issues. And one of her stories have also won the Ladli Media Award for gender sensitivity, which is something I didn't know about, but that's what she says. So thank you, Sudha, once again for coming. Pleasure to have you. Can you hear me, Sudha?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Krishnan joined the Hindu in 1978. He was there for 12 years in his first innings with the Hindu till 1990, where he covered almost all sporting events at both national and international levels. 2 Cricket World Cups, 2 Asian Games, 1 Olympics. He's also covered the Bhopal gas tragedy, which we still remember with sadness. He was also in Jaffna in Sri Lanka, where he had an exclusive photo shoot of the LTT chief then, Mr. Prabhakaran. And for a while, Mr. Krishnan left the Hindu and he was with the Associated Press. And after that stint with the Associated Press, he rejoined the Hindu in 2005 as their picture editor. He headed a team of more than 150 photographers and photo stringers across India. He's photo documented the city of Madras or Chennai twice. And incidentally, for those of you who might be interested to know, he has a collection of more than 10,000 images of the city, which nobody else has, I presume. And quite significantly, Mr. Krishnan has also helped the Hindu set up their photo archives. He's organized and digitized over 1.5 million images. So welcome on board, Mr. Krishnan. Thank you again for readily agreeing to come. And we look forward to your inputs on this program. Can you hear me, Mr. Krishnan? Mr. Krishnan, can you hear me? You've, I think, muted your mic. Can you just unmute and say yes so that we know you can hear us? Can somebody, yeah. He's unmuted. He has to unmute his mic.
I think Sashi, he has been disconnected. I think he'll be coming back. He's got disconnected. I'll connect with him again. You just continue.
Yeah, wait. Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, he's there.
Fine. Okay. Did you hear my introduction of you in the past few minutes, or did you miss that? Were you there on?
No, I got that.
You got that. Okay.
I was there on.
Okay, that's all right. It's not really for you, for the others, but now you're fine. I just wanted to hear you loud and clear, so that's fine. Right. So let's start this as a conversation more than have each of you come and speak for 10 minutes. I think we'll make it a conversation and make it freewheeling as much as we can. So as I mentioned earlier, there are many challenges for a reporter. And by reporter, I mean reporters, sub-editors, photographers, etc., working for newspapers, working for news magazines, etc., for online news sites and all that. There are many challenges. But what in today's world would you, starting with you, Sudha, say would be perhaps the most significant challenge? Sudha.
COVID has changed our lives in many ways, and as journalists, I think the one most important thing is it has tied our feet literally, because when we need to be out there in the field talking to people and gathering news, getting a first-hand impression of how things are. To not be able to do that without any fear is very stifling.
So you say that not being able to go out is muted.
Can I imagine here? With the photographer, it's a different ball game. You got to be on the field. You got to be on the field. You know, in a newsroom, in a news situation, you call the doctors, the nurses, the police, and the conservancy staff as frontline warriors. In a newsroom, the photographer is the frontline warrior because he's got to be there on the spot. There is no action replay for him. Okay. Now, as a reporter, you have the advantage of gathering information.
I think
Sudha,
she's
Sudha, we
muted.
can't hear you. You're muted, Sudha. We can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself, please. You've muted yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, please
Can
unmute.
you hear me
Please
now?
check that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think we broke off somewhere, and then Christian is now off the radar. But you can continue with what you were saying. Yes.
Yes. No. This is in response to. This is in response to Mr. Krishnan's statement. He very rightly said that photographers have to be out of the field. There is no other choice. I mean, reporters might have the privilege of being able to collect information from wherever they are. While that is true, you get a whole different perspective when you're actually there, when you're talking to people, when you're seeing things for yourself and, gathering information. But COVID has, placed restrictions because we, like you mentioned, Sashi, it's very important to remain safe about the safety. And I think the one thing that journalists have to hammer down to the public is that, wearing masks and maintaining social distancing is absolutely important, not only for themselves, but about everybody around them. Because if you are not doing so, or if somebody you're talking to isn't doing so, then you're putting a whole, bunch of people at risk. So this safety aspect has to be, hammered down. Of course, there's a lot of, talk about doom scrolling, and, people are just, getting very agitated by all the negative news that they see on in print and on television and all the other channels. But I think we need to strike a balance, and hammering this point about safety is actually very important, because we find that people are taking things far too lightly.
Yeah, Mr. Christian, you were saying something when you got cut off. Can you just come back and repeat that or extend on what you were saying?
One is, for a photographer, it's a different ball game altogether. One is, now what makes front page news? It's only calamities, disasters, calamities. It can be floods, it can be cyclones, it can be whatever it is. But it is disasters which make probably 75 to 80% of page one news and page one photographs. Now with the COVID, it's no different. Now, as a photographer, he has got to be there on the spot. As a reporter, you can. So in a newsroom, the photographer is probably call him the frontline warrior. Like you have the doctors and the nurses and the paramilitary forces and others. In a newsroom, the photographer is the frontline warrior because he has got to be there on the spot, whether it's a riot, whether it's a cyclone, whether it's a whatever. COVID, the same. Now, we started to know about the misery of the migrant labor only because of the pictures. A photographer was there on the spot to shoot the pictures. and send it to his newspaper. That is how the world woke up. India woke up. The politicians woke up in the misery of the migrant workers. And that's how relief started pouring in after seeing the pictures. Relief from not only from government agencies, but also private citizens who grouped themselves and started feeding the migrant workers, helping them around. So photographers have a major role to play. The major thing is he is the eye of the reader, and he's got to take them there. The keyword is he's the eye of the reader, by one picture or a series of pictures, and he's got to be there. He's got to be there on the spot, whether it is COVID or not. He's got to take precautions, and he's got to go there. There is absolutely, again, no accent replace for him.
Yeah. Of course, pictures speak more than 1,000 words, as we all know. Incidentally, for students who are watching, although we can't see your faces, but if you're watching, just for information, you might like to note this, that to provide journalists all the help they need in today's situation, with resource material and with some guidance. The Thomson Foundation has teamed up with several partners to produce a series of free online courses. It's called Journalism Now. Journalism Now, that's the platform. You can Google or log on and have a look. And now here you find there are various courses that are covered or offered. One includes safety, which we mentioned earlier, safety while reporting the story, which has become paramount. The second is, verifying facts. And this is in partnership with what is called the first draft. And then there is content production. So I would urge students to, check this out on Journalism Now or on the Thomson Foundation website. And now talking about safety, even in normal situations, one is not really very sure, because we worked in newspapers before. Mr. Krishnan and I have, so there's had a lot of experience in that field as well. At least from my experience, we've never had news publishers or news house managements or the editors really brief reporters and others who go out into the field on how to conduct oneself when there is a disaster or something that is dangerous. So it's basically it is up to the individual to try and protect oneself. I'm not sure whether what I'm saying is fully right, but since Mr. Krishnan, you've been there at the Bhopal gas tragedy, I think when you were with the Hindu or with the Associated Press, what was your experience then? Because that was also a great tragedy at that time. It was also a dangerous situation because people were running away from the gas. Can you tell us what it was like and whether the Hindu really supported you or if it was the Associated Press? Mr. Krishnan?
See, when that action happened, it was Rajiv Gandhi's election campaign. Rajiv Gandhi was delayed because he went there and then came. And everybody helped. In fact, the manager of the Indian Airlines promised to delay the flight at least by half an hour if I could make it to get the flight. So I went to Delhi. I went to Bhopal probably a day or two after the event. But still, I could see bodies all over. I could see people being carried to doctors, and then doctors and house surgeons and other people going around, visiting people, treating them on the road, and helping them to the hospitals. It was chaotic. We went there early in the morning. We couldn't get any place to stay. And at that point in time, see, much younger, so you want to be there where the action is. One of the key things for a photojournalist is being there at the right time at the right place. Otherwise you're finished. No, you can't be. You can be an also-ran, but if you want to be a good photojournalist, somehow you got to be at the right time at the right place. Bhopal was one thing where you had to take your chances. You can't say if I go there, I would get poisoned and things like that and sit back. No, for that matter, even COVID, you've seen so many photographers, going around with masks around and doing the job. They do take the chance, they take the risk, and they come out with pictures. So it's a part of life of a photographer of a photojournalist to take risks. To take risks. That's part of it. That's why you entered the profession. You didn't enter the profession to take pictures of people cutting ribbons. You entered the profession to do something exciting, to do something with useful, to do something very interesting like this. When news breaks, you got to be there. Dangers will be there. Even if you cross the road, you can get hit by a car. So dangers will be there everywhere. So you can't sit back saying, if I go there, that will happen, this will happen, and things like that. So you have to take your chances and you have to be there at the spot.
Yeah, that's all right. But taking off from what Professor Sanjeev had mentioned earlier about, and it's not only in Kerala, but we've seen it in other places, journalists and photographers especially being attacked during COVID because you have the social dimensions coming into play. What's your take on that, Mr. Krishnan? Before I move on to Sudha, maybe you can complete it as an extension of what you said earlier. Mr. Krishnan?
Okay, Mr. Sarshi, I think you are referring to the media practices in Kerala during COVID-19.
No, generally across India, not in Kerala alone, but generally across India, we do find the journalists and photographers, and find sometimes that people do attack them and they are taking pictures, etc.
Yeah, attacks on media and journalists. Actually, there is an NGO called RRAG who has conducted a study on these attacks on journalists and media persons during this pandemic period in India. They have brought out a report. I just remember. What I recall is about 55 journalists all over India has been attacked during this pandemic period for reporting may not be directly related to COVID-19 or something related to that, but during this period also journalists are being attacked everywhere, and even you can see when huge stories apart from COVID are breaking, and when media is going after those stories, you can see that there are systematic and concerted efforts from the people who are holding power against this media practices and media persons in particular. You can see that even in Kerala, in some other states also, you can see that television anchors, news reporters who are breaking some stories during this pandemic period have been cyber lynched, cyber bullied many times by organized political or powerful groups. There are many instances like that. So I think this is an issue which is to be addressed along with the safety protocols that we are planning. And one more point I wish to add is the sanitizing of information. We are having this sanitizing practices, physical sanitizing practices, but now the information itself is being sanitized by those who are holding the information. So this kind of sanitization may distort, may not give a holistic picture on what is happening around, and you may be bewildered by whether what is true, or maybe you are not sure whether you are having this right perspective on events. That is what I could gather, Mr. Sashi. I hope I have tried to answer your question.
That's okay, because it's a conversation, so we can exchange ideas. That's fine. Am I audible once again? Just to double check. Am I audible?
Yeah, Sashi. Yeah. Yes, Sashi.
All right. Okay, so to get your views on this, we were talking about safety, and of course, you heard Mr. Krishnan and Professor Sanjeev speak about various facets to safety. There's another facet also, which is, sort of, see, now journalists have, exceptional risks. It's not, it's not the ordinary risk, but it's exceptional, because you have the risk of, getting infected. And, getting infected doesn't mean just recovering immediately, because it could lead to something else as well. So with this sort of exceptional risk, are managements of news publishing houses, preparing journalists to go on assignments in the right way, which means, ensuring that they have the right equipment, for example, or the right tools, and, what about the hygiene protocols? Do you think that some of these things need to be stressed, perhaps in newsrooms all over, by the editors especially, who handle the reporters?
Sashi, I think the onus is largely on the individual to keep safe. But I think where journalists can make a demand is, for instance, when you have a press briefing, we've seen press briefings in post-COVID times where the place is teeming with journalists, and everybody is wants a quick sound bite or a good picture. Those kind of things, by putting people at risk, knowing the gravity of the situation, is, I think, really foolish. Both the people who call for the press conferences and attendees have to be very very wary of what kind of risks, because journalists shouldn't become super spreaders. We have these hot spots and super spreaders. So journalists shouldn't, end up being super spreaders, because that was what was suspected a few days ago when a lot of journalists tested COVID positive. So I think the onus is on everybody, and not just the management. It's also on the individual. It's also on somebody giving a press briefing. It's on each one of us should be conscious and wary. I also want to highlight on a couple of other things that affected people like me who are freelancers. The first thing is that, in the beginning, they said newspapers could be, could transmit the virus. There was an initial scare, and then people really got panicky whether they should stop their subscriptions, stop buying newspapers. And then after a while, that died down, and then they said it can't be spread through newspapers. But we've seen the number of pages come down, and newspapers, of course, lost a lot of revenue. People who are journalists who are doing regular columns, all that was taken off, and so the avenues for writing became fewer and fewer in the beginning. So now journalists are turning to newer platforms, smaller publications, which are which are willing to accept pieces. And also social media has been a great boon in many ways, because you can put out a thread on Twitter, you can put out information on Twitter. So social media has I shudder to think what the COVID situation would have been like without technology. Like, for instance, without a Zoom meeting or without Twitter or Facebook, because we would have been that much more handicapped in spreading, sharing information, reaching help, and highlighting a lot of problems that catch the attention of the powers that be. So I think
of course, we got it. Just to sort of, for the benefit of students and also for the others, just based on some story we had featured earlier in one of our journals, that indeed, Indian newsrooms, at least among the mainline, leading newspapers, they have, of course, indeed, sort of swung into action to keep journalists safe, and also to ensure, a steady source of content for readers. Now, taking examples just for the benefit of the students here, the Quint, for example, which is a website, has rolled out a work from home arrangement with only a few people coming to the office for shoots and edits. The Hindu Business Line enabled a large portion of its staff to work from home. From the editorial team, only those whose role involves publishing or making pages are coming to the office. And even among this small group, the company is now enabling VPN access to a few. The Indian Express has broken up its production operation, one of the most challenging areas of a newspaper operation, into several small units. That's on the technical side. At The Wire, the website, The Wire, those who have duties and who have, workflow, lend themselves to working from home. and reporters can go to the field to report, but must check with their department heads before they go to crowded places. So these are some of the measures that some of the newspapers have taken to keep the safety aspect in mind. Now, moving on, we can also look at another aspect that's very important, especially now. That's verifying information. You mentioned, Sudha, at the start that one of the major challenges is not being able to go out into the field. And I think Mr. Krishnan also echoed that view, that for a journalist or for a photographer, it is extremely important to be there when things are happening. But now, that always may not be possible because you're working from home to a large extent. So this whole aspect of verifying information becomes even more difficult than it is in the normal course. So you need to have, I suppose, an exceptional source network. Your network should be exceptional. Your network of sources should be exceptional. How do you maintain, the verification process and the clarification aspect? Because, as journalists, we were always taught in our good old days to check and double check and to clarify. Now that assumes, greater importance today because we need to give the right information to readers. How challenging is that? Mr. Krishnan, let's start with you before going on to Sudha.
For the photographer, such there is no work from home. Okay, I don't think anybody can work from home. News gathering has always been through your contacts, through telephone calls to the police, to the corporation, to the thing. That's been a way the reporters have always worked. They go to the spot, come back, and then they have their own services which they keep calling up, which they're doing it even now. But we have to be there. There's no work from home for us. Two, on the risk taking, I've spoken on several platforms before that if the management could have a special insurance scheme for the people who are on the field to take care of them, whether they are hurt or in case they are killed, it would make their life a lot easier.
That's an important point.
The risk to go out, that has not been done. Sorry. I don't think any management has come out with a special insurance scheme to cover the risk the photographer or the reporter takes on the field. I think that we certainly will have to look into.
Sudha?
About verification of sources of information, Sashi, like you said, we have to cultivate a huge network and, maintain the relationship with the network, because you can't just, lose touch with them completely and then, sort of pick up the phone and want information. So cultivating a network, maintaining the relationship, and like you said, verifying, cross-checking again and again. I remember reading somewhere that Mr. N. Ram, in those days of the Bofors reporting, used to make Chitra, who was covering the Bofors scandal, every bit of information he used to ask her to verify with 9 times over or something like that. So that is the only way. But as the other gentleman said, when sanitizing of information happens, like there was an allegation that numbers are not being, are sometimes being fudged and window dressed, and that led to a bit of some ill feeling in the Chennai scene about the numbers of people that were dying. I think when those things happen, it becomes even more difficult. But there are, and nowadays even NGOs are getting onto the job, and NGOs like Arapur Iyakam, they're actually verifying numbers and cross-checking information. Sometimes there's too much of it, conflicting information coming in, but the challenge really is that to put out accurate information. But then we find our ways of overcoming it by through our contacts, through accessing the right people for the right information to the best of our ability. Any journalist worth his salt or her salt should, be doing that.
Yeah, as far as misinformation is concerned, one of the things, again, for the benefit of students here, I mentioned the first draft earlier on when I was speaking. So now the first draft has a prescription for good reporting, and it expects journalists to avoid using sensationalist language, because there is the element of creating fear in readers. Because one is always afraid when you see certain news items that appear in newspapers, online sites, etc. So phrases like "no end in sight" or "turmoil," "killer," "catastrophe." Like Mr. Krishnan said, of course, the newspaper highlights all this all the time. I mean, daily it's all this sort of information. But even then, using words which really do not trigger fear, I think, is an important consideration that journalists must keep in mind, because they must understand that readers should not unnecessarily panic. And I think it is also the challenge for sub-editors and editors that they must ask reporters not to draw attention to rumors, and how to overcome that is a challenge for anybody, because with social media you have so much information that keeps coming in all the time. I would like to ask both of you what are some of the ways that this sort of thing can be overcome? The whole aspect of misinformation, and also to get the right news to the reader. Mr. Krishnan?
Social media certainly has its role to play. One, it is definitely keeping the reporters on their toes, and what the news reporters got to do is follow up on the social media story, verify it, find out the facts of it, and then report on it. Now, there are so many incidences which would not have seen the light of day but for the social media. It has certainly got its role to play, but when it comes to a newspaper, the concerned reporter who is doing the job can definitely take the lead from the social media, but he's got to verify facts before he could present it.
Now, there are techniques of doing this, I suppose, because there are specific organizations that help journalists, trace fake news. So I think there are software tools that are available, which means that technology can be used effectively to kind of get rid of this sort of thing. So, what's your understanding of this?
As you rightly pointed out, Sashi, this fear mongering and using the right terminologies is very, very important, because as all of us know, mental illnesses have also gone up during COVID times. And one of the things that psychologists and doctors caution us against is doom scrolling, because you have this flood of negative information that is hitting you every day, about numbers, about about tragic deaths, and people dying within minutes of being hospitalized. The thing about COVID is we still do not know enough about the disease, but certainly it's not a disease that that's easy to tide over, or it's not something that you can take chances with. So I think newsrooms and journalists should be very conscious about striking a right balance. Caution, yes, but tempered with correct information, and guiding people as to live and conduct themselves safely during this period, because we still do not know. Even doctors are admitting that they still do not know enough about the disease. Every day they are discovering something new. I mean, in the early stages, patients were put on ventilators. Now that's not the case. Then, the different drugs were talked about. And then, of course, there is news breaking out about this Ayurvedic drug. Yesterday, I received a WhatsApp news that saying a single lemon could cure COVID. So there's all kinds of, information floating around. So we have to be, temperate with the right amount of facts and science to anything that we put out, and at the same time not induce unnecessary panic.
So
In
we have to embrace social media with responsibility. I think that's
Yes.
really the thing, isn't it?
Yes, and WhatsApp is this WhatsApp university, as they call it, is another entity in itself that we have to learn to handle in these days.
Mr. Krishnan, during your times at the Hindu and even now, you have conversations with former journalists. Do you think there has been or something like a checklist for journalists might help, where you can advise them on how to go about when situations are really difficult? The do's and don'ts. The do's and don'ts.
One is most of the photographers depend upon the news, the reporters to give them the lead. The photographer's got to develop his own contact with the police, with everybody, so that it's not necessary that only the reporter should call up the police or control room. And you can do it yourself. You keep calling. You develop your own contact. You get breaking news. You share it with your reporter. It's not the other way around always. This is what is happening in most things. The photographers just sit down there. They wait for a call from the reporting section to tell them that is happening there. Why don't you do it? Why don't you develop your own set of contacts? Why don't you? And then you start as a routine. In Delhi, they used to do it. In Delhi, they have a system where the photographers, they make the routine calls, they get the invitation directly, and they have their own schedule. But down here in South, actually in Chennai, that's not being done. It's always handed down from the reporting section to the photographer. Instead of that, you start developing your own contacts, and that's how you go about things.
One of the things I also wanted to touch on, and they are also what Professor Sanjeev had mentioned, and what we all know, getting information. I mean, forget verifying, but getting the right information, especially from officials, from state departments, from bureaucrats, or from ministers, whoever, is not very easy as far as COVID is concerned, because there are numbers. Numbers don't tally. We've had instances where reports had to be changed and numbers were added. The number of deaths were added, changed suddenly. One fine day here, it might have happened elsewhere. How does a journalist? Can be a journalist, can be a photographer. How do you overcome this challenge of getting the right information? Because you can't bypass certain officials as well, isn't it? So you have to go what is sort of given in the government communique or by the Press Information Bureau. So how can you sort of overcome that? Is it possible to investigate yourself in some way? Sudha?
I think certain NGOs have taken this upon themselves to verify government information and come up with their take on it. But there's always but it takes time. All those things take time, and then again you're dealing with the same department, and you have to the same people in power. So it is not something that can be done overnight, because if you have to be absolutely sure of your information, you have to you put it through certain checks and filters before you put it out in the public domain. I would say that remains a challenge. And it would be so much easier if if the people in power actually gave us the right information, without any fear, and tell us how things are, like they are. So you don't go around another wild goose chase, uh, actually, in a time like this. I can understand in normal circumstances of investigative journalism, but here, where time is of essence, I think if they could save us that waste of energy, it would be so much better. But there are people and NGOs who are verifying and not taking things at face value, which is as it should be.
Mr. Krishnan, what's your
The government sometimes will suppress certain figures so that it doesn't spread panic. That could be one of the reasons for the government not coming out with the actual figures, so that people don't panic. Again, depending upon NGOs, what they can tell you is 5 days back the death count was 1,000, 1,500, and not 1,000 as the government has said. It's 5 days old. So NGOs can't give you online information. There's no other go other than to depend upon the government organization, which may not be true, and which again, just to prevent panic, they might even give you a lower figure.
What's your impression of the coverage so far in the Indian media? So to both of you, I ask this. We can look at various aspects. When I'm talking of coverage, let's say, let's look at some of these aspects. These are all important. One is depicting the pressure on hospitals. News stories that depict the pressure on hospitals, and after all, data can only tell a part of the story. Pictures probably can tell much more. That's one aspect. Things like flattening the curve. Are graphics being used well enough? Infographics, for example, are they being used well enough? Because very often, the reader finds information, very easily digestible when you look at an infographic, and the reader doesn't want to read a 500-word piece on, let's say, flattening the curve kind of thing. That's the other one. And then the geographical spread of the virus. How do you, get that sort of a thing in a jiffy? So are some of these things being covered properly or being put into proper use when you look at some of the newspapers and online sites? What are your impressions, both of you? Sudha or Krishna, one of you can start.
I think I'm muted, Sashi.
No, we can hear you.
Yeah,
we can hear you.
You can hear me? Yes. No, I think bite-sized information is really very helpful. And like you said, infographics and, ready reckoners are very, very, because there's a whole lot of information, and the reader is getting his information from multiple sources. So anything that can, that he can digest at a pinch is most welcome. And that is really the challenge, to demystify, de-jargonize all the all the technicalities and give it to the person in an understandable form is very, very important. While you were talking about hospitals, there is also this whole issue about hospitals fleecing patients. I think that became a big issue, and how they are overcharging, and all that was also brought out, and it was very, very helpful about how hospitals refusing to take in patients, beds being unavailable, and people dying in ambulances. All these stories actually came out from patients. You didn't get them from the officials, or you didn't get it from other sources. It was the afflicted people who actually came out with these stories, put them out on Twitter or here or Facebook or wherever. And that was where, like Mr. Krishnan said, other reporters picked up, got the lead from and followed up on it. So yes, information has to be simplified, made easily understandable, and without having to wade through too many words. If the reader can get it at a pinch, it would be a great boon, because there's too much information and too little time.
Krishnan, what's your take on this?
As far
Because
as
the number of deaths, for example, if you look at the number of deaths, I mean, that doesn't really paint the true picture. If you're looking at the number of cases that are being tested, they don't. So, again, judging by your impressions of what the coverage has been like.
as far as infographics are concerned, yeah, fine. But in fact, more space is now being allotted in newspapers for infographics than before. But remember that all these infographics are based on official information. Now, how far you could go by that, it brings it back to your original question, whether you could rely on official information, how far is it true. So all these infographics are based on official information. But definitely, it gives you an idea. It gives you an idea of what it is. As far as the photographers are concerned now, there are a lot of people who have gone aerial now. Instead of just reporting on COVID, on doctors, on this thing, a lot of people have gone aerial. They use the drones. They give you some fantastic views of the city, which is definitely very nice to look at. You can't keep on looking at pictures of patients. You can't keep on looking at pictures of disaster. A couple of pictures of Mahabalipuram and of the city people have produced taking on drones are really a relief to the reader.
Any other inputs you'd like to share about this before we sort of open up for questions or something? Mr. Krishnan,
I think COVID has given us COVID has given us lots of story ideas. I think from mental illness to domestic violence that has gone up in COVID times, to working from home, and other pieces on fashion, on what to wear, and what to wear for a Zoom meeting, and what to wear when you work from home, and other softer stories. I think COVID has given us a whole range of ideas about people not being able to sleep as well as they did normally, about exercise routines having changed. I think that is the upside of COVID for journalists. It's given us a whole lot of things to think and write about.
All right, because we've received several articles and pictures from journalists across India for our PI ICRC awards, and some of them are all top-notch. So, yeah, I think the fear element is not there much among journalists anyway. Yes, Mr. Krishnan?
Yeah, as Sudha said, journalists, both photographers and reporters, have started to think out of the box, literally think out of the box, look for stories which they never attempted before. So that is again, as Sudha has put it, the plus side of COVID, at least as far as journalists are concerned.
Can we open it for questions to Professor Sanjeev, because we have 20 minutes left? Yeah.
Sashi, I think there's something wrong. I'm not able to hear all of you unless I put it to my ear.
I think, Sudha ma'am, there is a little bit of problem with your network connectivity. You can switch off your video, so it will enhance the transmission.
Sound.
Yes.
Okay.
Sashi, we have received good around 9 questions. I mean, some of those questions which they have asked, we have also discussed as well. But what came out very clearly, what Mr. Krishnan said, and Madam Sudha also said, very 6 things which came out very prominently, which all our students should focus on. During a pandemic, very first principle which works is be first. Be first on the ground. Be there. And second point which came out very clearly is be right. Be first, be right, And the third one, which also came out, is be credible. Once we are there on time at the right place, then we will be able to provide the right information, and the right information can build credibility. And later on, what Sudha ma'am also mentioned, that when we report, we have to express our empathy and promote what actions are taking place, and lastly, show respect to the people who are affected. So these are the 6 principles which came out very strongly to overcome the challenges, and which our young reporters should focus on. And before I just go to the questions which students have asked, there was a lot of discussion about the safety guidelines. There was a lot of discussion on how reporting should be done. I take this opportunity to share with all the guidelines which we had developed in partnership with Press Institute of India, thanks to Sashi's leadership, that this book has been disseminated across India as well as globally. Because last month, Communication Initiative approached Press Institute and seeking permission to share that book globally. I'm just sharing my screen with that particular book. Just give me 1 minute, please. I don't see that coming up out here. 1 minute, 1 minute. First, let me share the safety guidelines. These are the safety guidelines. I think you can see this. This is the safety guidelines which was developed for the journalists. And for Kerala, thanks to our friend Baby Arun, where he coordinated with the Information and Public Relations Department, who jointly with UNICEF produced this safety guidelines, and it was shared with all. What I will do, Professor Sanjeev, I will share the Malayalam version of this book. Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see it.
This one I will be sharing with you. And with Press Institute, the book we were telling, it was just in as early as in November. I beg your pardon. In first week of April, we came out with this book, Coronavirus Disease Pandemic, a handbook for the journalist. This was widely circulated, and it benefited many. It was shared in North India, in the eastern part of the country, in Northeast. They all did it, and now across the world they are using it. And thanks to our friend Arun again, he translated this in Malayalam. This is the Malayalam version, which I will again share it with you for disseminating among the students. Apart from this, Government of India liked this book and requested us also to create a brochure on addressing stigma and discrimination, on how journalists can address this. So we created this book brochure also, addressing social stigma and social stigma associated with COVID-19, what journalists can do, do's and don'ts. This also, I will share it with you all. It will help our students. Now, coming back to the questions which students have asked us. I'll just go to...
Subhato,
yeah.
You mentioned being first and being right.
Yeah.
If you ask me, in that competition, the being first is because of the competition you have today. The breaking news. I mean, it's everywhere breaking news, but it's all the same news.
Yes.
But if you have to choose between being first and being right, a good journalist will always choose
being right. Yes. That is very important.
That is very important.
And we have questions related to that, Sachi. The very first question which Lizzie Vincent has asked, the concept of post-truth are invigorated by the information explosion generated on the web. And there are numerous instances of fake news. The question that is in front of us now is this: how can we use all of the tools within our reach to ensure that truth prevails? Anybody, either Sachi, you or Madam Sudha or Mr. Krishnan can take this.
See, it's impossible. Now, I'll just have a quick go at it before Sudha and Krishnan can answer. But I'm just saying that it's impossible for any human being to ensure that there's going to be absolute truth. If there's going to be truth all the way, we won't be living in the world that we are in, right? So, but there are ways and means to ferret out the truth and to see what you can report is honest and truthful, right? So after all, honesty, truthfulness, truth-telling, all that is part of good journalism. As far as fake news is concerned, there are certain software tools, especially to track and trace, the messages you get on WhatsApp, the videos you get on WhatsApp, for example, on YouTube. But those are software tools. But over and above all that, according to me, but I'm an old-fashioned journalist, and perhaps Mr. Krishna and both Sudha will agree with me, there is no substitute for real, solid, hard work verifying like we did years ago. And there is also what is called using your logic, using common sense, and using your gut feel in any situation you're in. Okay, so there is no magic wand to kind of wave at something and then get the truth out. A lot depends on how you perceive things and on how you are able to maintain the balance. Sudha Krishnan can probably, supplement.
Yeah, what I 100% agree with you, Sashi, and I would say that we should strive for a balance and get both sides of the story in situations wherever necessary. Don't sort of start out with one assumption, which many young journalists tend to do. Start out with an assumption over of your own, and then work towards reinforcing that. You simply have to get a balanced perspective. So you have to get the for and against, and when the jury is still out, you just have to go out and get all sides of the story and put it there before the reader.
Less of Googling. More of hard work.
As I put it earlier, being first is not all that important as being right. Because if you're going to get the news half an hour later, it's not going to matter as long as it is right. And of course, if something is breaking out at 12:30 in the night when you're going to catch your deadline, it all depends upon the situation. Something happening at 10 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't matter whether you're going to report it at 11. You're going to report something wrong at 10:30 and correct it at 11. It makes no sense. So you've got to be there, of course, at the earliest possible, but be right. And as far as the social media is concerned, you have to react to it, but don't overreact. Okay, don't take anything that comes into social media as right. So you got your own source to check your this thing as a newspaper man. You have your own source. You definitely got to keep a tab on social media, but then you got to verify the facts.
Good. Sashi, we have already run out of our time. Just the last question and few other questions are there. We will send our responses over email to Professor Sanjeev, who can share it with the students. The last question is something around the photography. It is from Gauri Baburaj. The question is, photographers are the frontline warriors. From Bhopal gas tragedy to Kerala floods, photographs has been powerful medium to spread empathy. What message would you like to give to the future photojournalists, and what are the values they should adhere to?
One is, as I said before, right time at the right place, or right place at the right time. One is, there are certain ethics to be followed. There are certain ethics to be followed, which is a separate chapter by itself. It can't be done I can't tell you in half a minute time. There are certain journalistic ethics to be followed when you are photographing people, especially when you can't infringe on their privacy. So these are the two things which you have to remember. But this is a separate topic by itself, which will have to be dealt in greater detail.
I just want to add one thing, Mr. Sugata Roy, that there is a new category of citizen journalists who are playing a very, very important role in tragedies, and they are taking it just with their phone cameras. They are able to come up with amazing, shots sometimes. So their role also cannot be discounted, and it does contribute to the dissemination of news.
Yes. As you said, mobile journalism, the mojo is really catching up fast. But at the end, we should be remembering, which all of you mentioned, the dictums which you said, being right is more important. Being right and being credible is more important than being first. With these words, I will end the question answer session, and over to you, Professor Sanjeev.
I think he's muted. Professor, you're on mute.
Sanjeev, unmute.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sudha, ma'am, Krishnan sir, Shashi sir, Sugada, Mrs. Sugada Roy. But this was a wonderful session. In fact, we all got a holistic perspective on what is happening around in the field of journalism through this webinar. Now let me invite Mr. Baby Arun to place formal vote of thanks.
Yeah, we are just edge of the closing, so I straightly coming to my assignment. I think the webinar was really helpful for the upbringing journalists of Marivanius College, and the insights and professional experience of Sudhamam and Krishan sir was really helpful. And I think the crux of this workshop is be first and being right. So I think it will definitely help the students. And this webinar was privileged by an excellent moderator. Thank you, Shashi sir, for your value-added suggestions and interventions. And thank you, Sugata sir, for the remarkable coordination. And least but not last, my former colleague and head of department, S.R. Sanjeev, for his coordination. And I like one of his coinage, like that sanitizing of news that Sudhir and all of other panelists mentioned. We should do cross-checking again and again. Sanjeev coined it into a very good phrase in the current scenario as sanitizing the news. So I really express my gratitude for that also. And I express my sincere thanks to all the participants, all the students, and let's wait for new sessions and new insights. Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you, each and everyone.
Thank you.
Before we end, Professor Sanjeev, the next edition of our webinar, we can have it after the Onam, because next week we were planning, but on Friday onwards, Onam celebration will be on.
Yeah.
So we will have it after Onam. So wishing you all, I take this opportunity, wishing you all happy Onam. Thank you very much.
Shashi, Krishnan sir, Arun, happy Onam from all of us. Thank you very much for this excellent seminar.
It will be a virtual Onam anyway. So for most
Thank
of us.
you.